Step into The Art of Poirot, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot masters the craft of mystery.
In the shadowed halls of Ravencliff Manor, a scream pierces the night. A loyal valet lies dead, a silver letter opener in his chest. Who among the elegant guests, each hiding secrets of love, greed, and betrayal, wielded the fatal blow? Was it the nervous heiress clutching forbidden letters, the brash American with a shady deal, or the doctor whose calm masks a desperate heart? Enter Hercule Poirot, the master detective whose little gray cells unravel a web of lies. Can you guess the killer before the truth is revealed? Dive into Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot's novel. Secrets and surprising twists, a mystery where every clue counts and no one is what they seem. Chapter 1. The Shadow over Ravencliff Manor. The late summer sun cast a golden haze over Ravencliff Manor, its sprawling silhouette perched atop the cliffs of Cornwall where the sea whispered secrets to the jagged rocks below. The estate, a labyrinth of ivy-clad stone and mullioned windows, seemed to hum with a quiet anticipation, as though it sensed the gathering storm of human passions within its walls. It was August 1925, and the air was thick with the scent of salt and honeysuckle, a deceptive calm before the tragedy that would soon unfold. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal friend and chronicler of Hercule Poirot's brilliance, had arrived at Ravencliff at the behest of its owner, Sir Reginald Ashbourne, a retired industrialist known for his fortune and his temper. The invitation had been vague yet urgent, penned in Sir Reginald's angular hand. A matter of grave concern, Captain Hastings. Bring your friend, the detective. Discretion is paramount. Hastings, ever susceptible to the allure of a mystery, had persuaded Poirot to abandon his London flat for a weekend in the countryside. Poirot, with his fastidious habits and distaste for rustic inconveniences, had agreed only after Hastings assured him of the manor's modern plumbing and the promise of a fine claret. The great hall of Ravencliff buzzed with polite conversation as the guests assembled for dinner. The chandelier gleamed, casting prisms of light across the polished mahogany table, where a feast of roasted pheasant and summer greens awaited. Sir Reginald, a broad-shouldered man with a mane of silver hair and eyes like chipped flint, presided at the head of the table. His presence was commanding, yet there was a brittleness to his smile, as though he carried a weight he dared not share. To his right sat his wife, Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, a woman of ethereal beauty whose delicate features belied a sharp wit. Her sapphire necklace caught the candlelight, drawing Hastings' eye as she spoke softly to her neighbor. Across from her was their daughter Beatrice, a spirited young woman of 22, her auburn curls barely tamed by a velvet headband. Her laughter rang out, but her eyes darted nervously toward her father. The other guests formed an eclectic circle. Dr. Malcolm Travers, the family physician, was a lean man with a perpetually furrowed brow, his fingers drumming restlessly on the tablecloth. Beside him sat Clara Wentworth, Sir Reginald's widowed sister-in-law, her mourning black stark against the vibrant room. Her son, Lionel Wentworth, a lanky young man with a penchant for poetry and a sullen air, picked at his food. Then there was Victor Crane, a brash American businessman and Sir Reginald's latest partner in a mining venture, his booming voice cutting through the murmurs. His wife, Margot Crane, a former actress with a penchant for dramatic gestures, sipped her wine with an air of calculated boredom. Finally, there was Miss Evelyn Price, Sir Reginald's private secretary, a prim woman whose spectacles and severe bun suggested efficiency but whose eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Hastings observed them all, his soldier's instinct attuned to the undercurrents of tension. The conversation flowed smoothly, talk of London theatre, the weather, the latest political scandals. But there was a falseness to it, like actors performing a well-rehearsed play. Sir Reginald's toast to new beginnings was met with strained smiles, and Hastings caught Clara Wentworth's hand tightening around her napkin. As the meal progressed, Poirot, seated beside Hastings, remained silent, his small, precise hands folded neatly before him. His mustache, immaculately waxed, twitched slightly as he surveyed the room with those keen green-gray eyes. Hastings knew that look. Poirot was cataloguing every gesture, every word, every glance. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured, leaning close. "Observe the Lady Eleanor. She smiles, yes, but her eyes, they do not join in the merriment. And the young Lionel, he avoids his mother's gaze. There is a story here, n'est-ce pas?" Before Hastings could reply, a sharp cry pierced the air. All heads turned to the doorway, where a maid stood trembling, her face pale as chalk. "Sir Reginald!" she gasped. It's the study. You must come at once." The room erupted into chaos. Sir Reginald rose, his chair scraping against the floor, and strode toward the door, the guests trailing behind like a flock of anxious sheep. Hastings and Poirot followed, the latter moving with a calm deliberation that contrasted sharply with the other's haste. The study, a wood-paneled sanctum lined with books and maps, was in disarray. Papers were scattered across the desk. A crystal decanter lay shattered on the floor, and the heavy scent of whiskey mingled with something sharper, something metallic. In the center of the room, sprawled across a Persian rug, lay Sir Reginald's valet, Thomas Gray. His lifeless eyes stared at the ceiling, a crimson stain spreading across his white shirt front. A letter opener, its silver handle gleaming, protruded from his chest. Lady Eleanor stifled a scream, clutching Beatrice, who swayed as though she might faint. Dr. Travers knelt beside the body, his fingers probing for a pulse, though the gesture seemed futile. "He's dead," Travers announced, his voice flat. "Stabbed, not more than an hour ago." "Who could have done this?" Clara Wentworth whispered, her hand at her throat. Lionel stood frozen, his face a mask of shock, while Victor Crane muttered something about damned savagery. Margot Crane, oddly composed, watched the scene with a detached curiosity, as though it were a play unfolding on a stage. Poirot stepped forward, his small frame commanding attention despite the chaos. He knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the letter opener without touching it. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his eyes scanning the room. "The placement of the wound, it is precise. The papers disturbed but not random. And this," he pointed to a small muddy footprint near the desk, barely visible on the rug's edge. "This is most curious." Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's methods, knew better than to interrupt. The detective's mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of the scene. "Captain Hastings," Poirot said, rising, "we must ensure this room remains untouched until the police arrive. But first, I must speak with the household. There is much to learn, and the little gray cells, they are already stirring." As the guests were ushered back to the dining room, their faces a gallery of fear, guilt, and suspicion. Hastings felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sea breeze drifting through the open window. Ravencliff Manor, so serene at first glance, was now a stage for murder, and Hercule Poirot was about to unmask its secrets. The police, summoned from the nearby village, arrived within the hour, led by Inspector Grayson, a gruff man with a penchant for quick conclusions. He surveyed the scene, declared it a crime of passion, and began questioning the servants, much to Poirot's quiet amusement. "The good inspector," Poirot whispered to Hastings. "He sees only the surface. But we, mon ami, we shall dig deeper." The guests were instructed to remain at Ravencliff, their weekend plans now a grim obligation. As the clock struck 10, the manor settled into an uneasy silence, broken only by the distant crash of waves. Poirot, standing by the study's window, gazed out at the darkened cliffs. "The truth, Hastings," he said softly. "It hides in the shadows of this house. But fear not. The little gray cells, they will find it." And so began the unraveling of the mystery at Ravencliff Manor, a puzzle that would test even the formidable intellect of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 2. The Crime Unveiled. The air in Ravencliff Manor hung heavy with the scent of tragedy as the clock in the great hall tolled midnight. The guests, confined to the drawing room under Inspector Grayson's orders, sat in uneasy clusters, their faces pale under the flickering glow of the gas lamps. The murder of Thomas Gray, Sir Reginald's valet, had shattered the veneer of civility, and whispers of suspicion darted like shadows among them. Hercule Poirot, however, remained apart, standing by the fireplace with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes gleaming with the quiet intensity of a predator sizing up its prey. Captain Hastings, seated nearby, watched his friend with a mixture of admiration and impatience, knowing that Poirot's mind was already weaving a tapestry from the threads of the evening's chaos. Inspector Grayson, a man whose broad shoulders and bristling mustache suggested authority rather than insight, had taken charge with a bluster that grated on Poirot's sensibilities. "A clear case, Mr. Poirot," Grayson declared, striding into the drawing-room with a notebook in hand. "The valet was stabbed with that letter opener. Likely a spur-of-the-moment act. Someone in this house had a grudge, and I'll wager it's one of the servants. They're always skulking about, overhearing things they shouldn't." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of amusement. "Monsieur l'inspecteur," he said, his voice smooth as polished oak, "you assume much, but you observe little. The letter opener, it is not a weapon of impulse. Its placement in the chest, précis, deliberate, suggests intent. And the footprint, so small and muddy near the desk, it is not the mark of a servant's heavy boot. No, we must look deeper." Grayson huffed, clearly unaccustomed to being contradicted, but he waved a hand dismissively. "We'll question everyone, of course, but mark my words, it's a servant. They've got access, motive. Maybe Gray was blackmailing one of them." Hastings suppressed a smile. He had seen Poirot dismantle such assumptions before, and he knew the inspector was in for a humbling lesson. The guests, meanwhile, shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting to one another. Lady Eleanor, her sapphire necklace glinting, sat rigid, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Beatrice, her daughter, fidgeted with a lace handkerchief, her earlier vivacity replaced by a pallor that matched the moonlight streaming through the windows. Dr. Travers, the physician, murmured something to Clara Wentworth, who nodded curtly, her black mourning dress absorbing the light. Lionel Wentworth, her son, slouched in a corner, his eyes fixed on the floor as though it held answers. Victor Crane, the American, paced near the window, his loud voice now subdued, while his wife Margot reclined with a glass of brandy, her expression unreadable. Miss Evelyn Price, the secretary, scribbled notes in a small ledger, her pen moving with mechanical precision. Poirot stepped forward, his small frame commanding the room's attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his accent crisp and deliberate, "a man is dead, and the truth it hides among us. I, Hercule Poirot, will find it, but I require your cooperation. Each of you was present this evening. Each of you may hold a piece of the puzzle. I ask only that you speak the truth, or if you cannot, that you remain silent. For lies, they reveal as much as honesty." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Victor Crane stopped pacing, his brow furrowed. "Look here, Poirot, I'm a businessman, not a criminal. I barely knew the man. Why would any of us kill a valet?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Why indeed, Monsieur Crane? That is the question. But let us begin with the facts. Thomas Gray was killed between 9 and 10 this evening, yes? The dinner began at 8, and the maid discovered the body at 9:30. Where were each of you during this time?" Inspector Grayson interjected, flipping open his notebook. "I've already got their statements. Everyone was at dinner except for a few minutes here and there. The servants were in the kitchen, save for the maid who found him." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the inspector with a gentle gesture. "Permit me, Inspector, to verify. Madame Ashbourne, you remained at the table throughout the meal." Lady Eleanor nodded, her voice steady but soft. "I did, Mr. Poirot. I had no reason to leave. My place was with our guests." "And you, Mademoiselle Beatrice?" Poirot's gaze shifted to the young woman, who flinched slightly. I stepped out for a moment just after the soup course," Beatrice admitted, twisting her handkerchief. "I needed air. The terrace, it's only a few steps from the dining room. I was gone no more than 5 minutes." Poirot's eyes narrowed. 5 minutes, you say? And did you see anyone on the terrace?" Beatrice hesitated, her cheeks flushing. "No, no one. It was dark." Poirot turned to Dr. Travers, who cleared his throat. "I left briefly to check my medical bag in the hall," he said. "Around 9, I think. I was back before the main course." "And you, Monsieur Wentworth?" Poirot's voice was deceptively mild as he addressed Lionel, who looked up sharply. "I was at the table," Lionel said, his tone sullen. "Didn't move an inch." Clara Wentworth touched her son's arm, her voice low. "He's right, Mr. Poirot. We were together the entire time." The questioning continued, each guest offering an alibi, some more convincing than others. Victor Crane claimed he'd stepped out to smoke a cigar on the veranda. Margot Crane said she'd visited the powder room, and Miss Price admitted to fetching a ledger from her room upstairs. Each account was precise, yet Poirot's expression remained inscrutable, as though he heard not only their words but the silences between them. Hastings, watching closely, noted the small details Poirot fixated upon. The way Beatrice's fingers trembled, the faint smudge of ink on Miss Price's sleeve, the way Victor Crane's eyes flicked toward his wife when questioned. These were the threads Hastings knew that Poirot would weave into a net to trap the guilty. As the interviews concluded, Poirot requested to see the study again. Grayson, reluctant but curious, led the way, with Hastings trailing behind. The room was as they had left it, the body now covered with a sheet, the letter opener still embedded in Thomas Gray's chest. Poirot moved with methodical grace, his eyes darting from the scattered papers to the muddy footprint, which had dried slightly but remained distinct. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing to the footprint. "It is small, yes, but not a woman's shoe. The pattern, it is unusual, perhaps a riding boot, but not one worn by a servant. And this—" He gestured to a crumpled piece of paper half hidden under the desk, its edge stained with a faint smear of blood. Using a handkerchief, Poirot retrieved it, unfolding it to reveal a scrawled note. "Meet me at 9. Trust no one." Hastings gasped. "A rendezvous. Gray was meeting someone and they killed him." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, mon ami, but the note, it is not addressed, and the blood, why only a smear? If it fell during the struggle, it should be more marked, non? No, this note is a clue, but not as simple as it seems." Grayson, overhearing, snorted. "You're making this complicated, Poirot. It's a lover's quarrel or a servant's grudge. I'll have the maids questioned again by morning." Poirot inclined his head, unruffled. "Question as you will, Inspector, but I, Hercule Poirot, will follow the truth, not the convenience." As they returned to the drawing-room, the guests dispersed to their rooms, their footsteps echoing in the silent corridors. Hastings lingered, watching Poirot, who stood by the window gazing at the moonlit cliffs. "What do you think, Poirot?" he asked. "And who did it?" Poirot turned, his eyes alight with purpose. "The little gray cells, they are busy, Hastings. The alibis, they are too perfect, too rehearsed. Someone lies and someone else knows it. Tomorrow we shall see what the morning reveals." The manor settled into a restless sleep, but for Hercule Poirot the night was alive with questions, each one a step closer to unmasking a killer. Chapter 3. The arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning sun rose reluctantly over Ravencliff Manor, its rays struggling to pierce the mist that clung to the Cornish cliffs like a shroud. The house, so grand in the golden light of the previous evening, now seemed to crouch under the weight of its secrets, its stone walls absorbing the chill of the sea. Inside, the atmosphere was no less oppressive. The murder of Thomas Gray had cast a pall over the household, and the guests, confined to the manor by Inspector Grayson's orders, moved with the wariness of actors awaiting their cue in a tragedy. Captain Hastings, bleary-eyed from a restless night, stood in the breakfast room stirring a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The room was sparsely occupied. Only Clara Wentworth and Miss Evelyn Price sat at the table, the former picking at a slice of toast, the latter scribbling in her ever-present ledger. The others, Hastings noted, had either taken breakfast in their rooms or avoided it altogether. The absence of Sir Reginald, Lady Eleanor, and Beatrice was particularly conspicuous, their empty chairs a silent testament to the strain within the family. Hercule Poirot, however, was undeterred by the somber mood. He entered the room with his characteristic precision, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his mustache immaculately waxed. His small, neat figure seemed incongruous against the heavy oak paneling, yet his presence commanded attention. "Bonjour, mes amis," he said, his voice bright but laced with an undercurrent of purpose. "A fine morning, is it not? Though perhaps less fine for some than others." Clara Wentworth looked up, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. Mr. Poirot, how can you speak of fine mornings when a man lies dead? This house feels cursed. Poirot inclined his head, his expression sympathetic but unyielding. Madame, it is precisely in such darkness that the light of truth must shine. The death of Monsieur Gray is a puzzle, and I, Hercule Poirot, am here to solve it. But I require your assistance, all of you. Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's theatrical flair, suppressed a smile. He knew this was no idle boast. Poirot's arrival at Ravencliff, though prompted by Sir Reginald's vague letter, was now a mission. The detective had spent the early hours of the morning in quiet contemplation, refusing to share his thoughts even with Hastings. "Let the little gray cells work in peace, mon ami," he had said, waving off Hastings' questions. Now, as Poirot surveyed the breakfast room, his eyes gleamed with the intensity of a man who saw not just people but patterns, motives, and lies. Inspector Grayson bustled in, his notebook already open, his face flushed with the self-important air of a man who believed he held the reins. "Mr. Poirot," he said brusquely, "I've got the servants lined up for questioning again. The maid who found the body, she's nervy, might let something slip. Care to join us?" Poirot's smile was polite but cool. "In due time, Inspector. But first I must speak with the master of the house. Where is Sir Reginald?" Grayson hesitated, his confidence faltering. "He's indisposed. Took to his room after last night. Shock, I reckon." "Shock, you say?" Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Or perhaps something more. I shall see him at once. Captain Hastings, you will accompany me." Leaving Grayson to his interrogations, Poirot and Hastings ascended the grand staircase to Sir Reginald's private quarters. The corridors of Ravencliff were lined with portraits of stern-faced Ashbournes, their eyes seeming to follow the pair as they passed. Hastings felt a prickle of unease, as though the house itself were watching, judging. Sir Reginald's room was a study in opulence, with velvet drapes and a massive four-poster bed. The man himself sat by the window, a glass of brandy in his hand despite the early hour. His silver hair was disheveled, his face etched with lines that spoke of sleeplessness and strain. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice hoarse, "I didn't expect you so soon. This business with Gray, it's unthinkable." Poirot seated himself opposite, his posture impeccable. "Monsieur Ashbourne, it is precisely because it is unthinkable that I am here. Your letter to Captain Hastings spoke of a grave concern. Was it the death of Thomas Gray you feared, or something else?" Sir Reginald's hand trembled, the brandy sloshing against the glass. I can't say, not yet. Gray was a good man, loyal. But he knew things about this house, this family. I warned him to keep silent." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice soft but insistent. "What things, monsieur? Secrets, perhaps? Secrets that might drive someone to murder?" Sir Reginald's gaze darted to the window, avoiding Poirot's scrutiny. "You're fishing, Poirot. I've nothing to hide. But this house, it's full of shadows. People talk, they scheme. Gray might have overheard something he shouldn't." Hastings, standing by the door, felt a surge of frustration. Sir Reginald's evasiveness was maddening, yet Poirot remained unruffled, his fingers steepled as he studied the man. "Very well," Poirot said at last. "But I must know the movements of everyone last night. You, monsieur, where were you between 9 and 10? "I was at dinner," Sir Reginald snapped. "You saw me there. I didn't leave the table." Poirot nodded as though satisfied, but Hastings knew better. That nod was a trap, a signal that Poirot had caught a scent. They took their leave, descending to the study where the police had cordoned off the crime scene. The body of Thomas Gray had been removed, but the letter opener remained, now bagged as evidence. Poirot knelt by the desk, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the muddy footprint. "Observe, Hastings," he said, his voice low. "The footprint, it is not from a servant's boot as I said. But see here." He pointed to a faint scratch on the floor, barely visible beneath the rug. A chair was moved, perhaps dragged after the murder. Someone wished to conceal something. Hastings frowned, peering at the mark. Conceal what? The footprint? Perhaps, Poirot mused. Or perhaps something else. The note we found, "Meet me at 9. Trust no one. It is too convenient, no? A clue left for us to find, but why? To mislead or to point to the truth?" Their inspection was interrupted by the arrival of Lady Eleanor, her face pale but composed. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "I understand you're questioning everyone. I wish to help. Thomas was... he was more than a valet to us. He was trusted, almost family." Poirot's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "Madame, your loyalty to your servant is admirable. But tell me, did he ever speak of enemies? Of secrets he held?" Lady Eleanor hesitated, her fingers brushing the sapphire necklace at her throat. "He was discreet," she said carefully. "But lately he seemed troubled. I overheard him speaking with Beatrice once in hushed tones. I thought nothing of it at the time." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "With Mademoiselle Beatrice? Most interesting. And where is your daughter now?" "She's resting," Lady Eleanor replied quickly. "This has been a terrible shock." As she left, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression unreadable. "The daughter, she is nervous, yes? And the mother she protects. There is a thread here, Hastings, but it is tangled. We must proceed with care." The rest of the morning was spent interviewing the household. Beatrice, when summoned, was pale and evasive, claiming she barely knew Gray beyond his duties. Dr. Travers reiterated his brief absence to check his medical bag, while Victor Crane blustered about his cigar break, his wife Margot offering a vague corroboration. Lionel Wentworth, sullen as ever, insisted he'd stayed at the table, though Hastings noted a faint tremor in his hands. Miss Price, the secretary, was precise in her account, claiming she'd returned to her room for a ledger at exactly 9:15. Each alibi was a piece of the puzzle, yet Poirot's silence suggested he found them lacking. As the sun climbed higher, he stood by the study window, gazing at the cliffs. "Hastings," he said softly, "this murder, it is not random. It is a performance, staged for an audience. But who is the director and who the players? That, mon ami, is what we must discover." The manor pulsed with unspoken truths, and Poirot, with his little gray cells, was ready to unravel them. Chapter 4. The questions deepen. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Ravencliff Manor, casting long shadows across the polished floors, as though the house itself were stretching to conceal its secrets. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and the faint tang of the sea, but the elegance of the setting did little to ease the tension that gripped the household. The murder of Thomas Gray had transformed the manor into a gilded cage, and its occupants, under Inspector Grayson's watchful eye, moved with the caution of those who knew they were being observed. Hercule Poirot, however, was no mere observer. His keen eyes missed nothing, and his mind, as Captain Hastings well knew, was already sifting through the fragments of truth buried beneath layers of deceit. Poirot had requested a private room for his interviews, and Sir Reginald, with a grudging nod, had provided a small parlor off the main hall. The room was intimate, its walls lined with faded tapestries depicting pastoral scenes, a stark contrast to the grim purpose it now served. A single table, flanked by 2 chairs, stood at its center, and Poirot sat with the precision of a judge, his notebook open before him, his pencil poised like a conductor's baton. Hastings stood by the window, watching the cliffs where gulls wheeled against the gray sky, his role as Poirot's confidant both a privilege and a frustration. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but firm, "we must proceed with method. The alibis, they are like a symphony. Each note seems harmonious, yet there is discord beneath. We shall speak with each guest one by one and listen for the false note." Hastings nodded, accustomed to Poirot's metaphors. "Who's first, then?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "We begin with Mademoiselle Beatrice. Her nervousness, it is pronounced, and her mother's protection, it is telling. There is something she knows, or fears." Beatrice Ashburn entered the parlor with the air of a schoolgirl summoned to the headmaster's office. Her auburn curls were pinned haphazardly, and her green eyes darted between Poirot and the door, as though she longed to flee. She wore a simple day dress, its hem slightly creased, a detail Poirot noted with a flicker of interest. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, his tone gentle but unyielding, "you told us last night that you stepped onto the terrace for air, yes? 5 minutes, you said. But the terrace, it is not far from the study. Did you hear anything? A cry, perhaps, or footsteps?" Beatrice's fingers twisted the lace cuff of her sleeve. "No, Mr. Poirot, nothing. It was quiet, except for the sea. I just needed a moment alone." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "Alone, you say? Yet your mother mentioned you spoke with Thomas Gray recently in hushed tone. What was the nature of this conversation?" Beatrice's cheeks flushed, and she glanced at Hastings, who offered an encouraging nod. "It was nothing," she said quickly. He asked about a book I was reading. Thomas was kind, always asking about my interests. That's all." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A book, mademoiselle? Most curious. And where were you when this conversation took place?" "In the library a few days ago," she replied, her voice steadier now. "I don't remember the exact day." Poirot made a note, his pencil moving with deliberate precision. "Merci, mademoiselle. You may go, but I may call upon you again." As Beatrice left, Hastings raised an eyebrow. "She's hiding something, isn't she?" Poirot nodded. "Oui, Hastings. The eyes, they betray her. She is afraid, but of what? The truth or the consequences of it?" Next came Dr. Malcolm Travers, his lean frame tense as he sat across from Poirot. His fingers drummed a restless rhythm on the table, a habit Hastings had noted the previous evening. "Dr. Travers," Poirot began, "you left the dining room to check your medical bag, yes? A curious errand during dinner. What prompted this?" Travers cleared his throat, his brow furrowing. "A precaution, Mr. Poirot. I'm the family physician, and Sir Reginald has been under strain. I wanted to ensure I had his medication on hand, should he need it." "And this bag," Poirot pressed, "it was in the hall. not far from the study. Did you see anyone near the study door? Travers hesitated, his fingers stilling. No one. The hall was empty. I was only gone a moment, back before the pheasant was served. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A moment, you say? Yet time, it is slippery, is it not? Merci, doctor, that will be all for now. The interviews continued, each guest offering a carefully crafted account. Clara Wentworth, her mourning black stark against the parlor's soft hues, insisted she and Lionel had remained at the table, their alibis intertwined. Lionel, when questioned alone, was sullen, his answers curt. I didn't move, he muttered. Ask Mother, she'll tell you. Victor Crane, the American, was next, his booming voice subdued but his manner defensive. I told you, Poirot, I was smoking a cigar on the veranda. Margot saw me step out. What's this about, anyway? You think I'd stab a valet over nothing? Poirot's voice was smooth as silk. Monsieur Crane, I think nothing yet. I observe. Your cigar, it was lit at what time? 9, maybe a bit after, Crane replied, his eyes narrowing. What's that got to do with anything? Poirot made a note, his expression unreadable. Everything, monsieur, has to do with something. Margot Crane, when summoned, was a study in theatrical poise. She reclined in the chair, her silk dress catching the light, and spoke with the cadence of a seasoned performer. I was in the powder room, Mr. Poirot, freshening up, a lady's prerogative, surely. And you saw no one? Poirot asked, his gaze fixed on her. No one, she said, her smile faint. Though I heard Victor's voice on the veranda, he's not exactly discreet. Finally, Miss Evelyn Price entered, her ledger clutched like a shield. Her spectacles glinted as she sat, her posture rigid. I fetched a ledger from my room, she said before Poirot could ask. Sir Reginald asked me to review some figures after dinner. I was gone no more than 10 minutes. Poirot tilted his head. And this ledger, mademoiselle, it was urgent enough to leave a dinner party? Miss Price's lips tightened. Sir Reginald is particular about his accounts. I do as he asks. As she left, Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Hastings, he said softly. The alibis, they are like a clock with too many hands, all pointing to different times, yet none quite right. The terrace, the hall, the veranda, each place is near the study, yet no one sees another. It is impossible, non? Hastings frowned. You think they're lying? Not all, Poirot replied, but some, and those who do not lie they omit. We must return to the study. There is more to learn. The study, still cordoned off, was a silent witness to the crime. Poirot moved, with purpose, his eyes scanning the desk, the rug, the window. He paused at the shattered decanter, its shards glinting in the afternoon light. The whiskey, Hastings, he said, pointing to the stain on the floor. It is not random. Someone drank here, perhaps Gray, perhaps his killer. And this... He knelt by the window, where a faint smudge of mud marked the sill. The footprint we found, it matches this. Someone entered or left through this window. Hastings' eyes widened. An outsider, then? Poirot's smile was cryptic. Or someone who wishes us to think so. The window was open last night, yes, but the latch is stiff. It would require strength to open it quietly. As they left the study, Poirot's gaze lingered on the corridor, where a maid was polishing a brass sconce. The servants, he murmured. They see everything, yet they say nothing. We must speak with the maid who found the body. Her fear, it is genuine, but what does she fear? The maid, A young woman named Annie was summoned to the parlor. Her hands trembled as she stood before Poirot, her eyes red from crying. "I didn't see nothing, sir," she whispered. "I went to the study to bring Sir Reginald's evening paper, and there he was, Mr. Gray, dead." Poirot's voice was gentle. "And before, Annie? Did you see anyone near the study, anyone at all?" Annie hesitated, her gaze dropping. I saw Miss Beatrice, sir, on the terrace just before 9. She looked upset, like she'd been crying." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, Annie. You have been most helpful." As the maid fled, Hastings turned to Poirot. "Beatrice again. She's at the heart of this, isn't she?" Poirot nodded slowly. "Perhaps, mon ami. But the heart of a mystery is never simple. The little gray cells, they tell me there is more, much more, to uncover." The manor hummed with unspoken truths, and Poirot, with his relentless logic, was closing in on the killer's shadow. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings Emerge. The sun dipped low over Ravencliff Manor, painting the cliffs with a crimson glow that seemed to echo the blood spilled within its walls. The atmosphere in the house had grown taut, like a violin string stretched to breaking. The guests, confined by Inspector Grayson's orders, moved through the corridors with the wariness of prey, their eyes darting to one another, seeking guilt or absolution. Hercule Poirot, however, remained a calm center in the storm, his meticulous mind sifting through the tangle of alibis and half-truths. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, felt the weight of the mystery pressing down. Sensing that the truth was close yet maddeningly elusive. In the library, where Poirot had requested to hold his next round of inquiries, the air was thick with the scent of old leather and dust. The room was a sanctuary of knowledge, its shelves lined with volumes of history, poetry, and science. But today it served as a stage for unraveling human deceit. Poirot sat at a long oak table, his notebook open, his green-gray eyes scanning the faces of the assembled guests. Inspector Grayson, grudgingly present, stood by the door, his arms crossed, his skepticism palpable. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the tense silence, "the death of Thomas Gray is not a simple matter. It is a puzzle, and each of you holds a piece. But some pieces, they are false, red herrings meant to mislead. Today we shall separate the truth from the deception." A murmur rippled through the room. Victor Crane, the American businessman, shifted uncomfortably, his loud tie a stark contrast to his subdued demeanor. "Look here, Poirot," he said, his voice gruff. "I've told you everything. I was on the veranda smoking. You're barking up the wrong tree if you think I'm involved." Poirot's smile was polite but sharp. "Monsieur Crane, the tree, it has many branches. Your cigar, it leaves a distinctive ash, yes? Yet the veranda, it is curiously clean. Perhaps you were not there as long as you claim." Crane's face reddened, but before he could retort, Inspector Grayson interjected, "We've got something solid, Mr. Poirot. One of the footmen, James, admitted to a row with Gray last week. Something about missing wages. He was seen near the study just before 9 last night. I say he's our man." Hastings, standing by a bookcase, watched Poirot's reaction. The detective's mustache twitched, a sign of amusement or disdain. "A footman, Inspector, with a motive so convenient? No, it is too simple, but let us speak with this James." The footman, a wiry young man with a nervous tic in his jaw, was summoned. He stood before Poirot, his cap clutched in his hands, his eyes darting to Grayson. "I didn't do it, sir," he said, his voice trembling. Yes, I argued with Mr. Gray, but it was nothing serious. He said I'd been shorted on my wages, but he'd fix it. I was in the kitchen most of the evening. Ask anyone. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. And near the study, James? You were seen there. What were you doing? James swallowed hard. I was fetching a tray from the dining room, sir. Passed by the study, but I didn't go in, I swear it. Poirot made a note, his expression unreadable. Merci, James. You may go, but remain available. As the footman hurried out, Grayson smirked. Sounds guilty to me. Motive, opportunity, why look further? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Because, Inspector, the obvious is rarely the truth. The letter opener, it is not a weapon of a footman's quarrel. It is deliberate, precise, and the footprint, small, refined. It is not James's boot. No, we must look to the guests. A gasp escaped Beatrice Ashbourne, who sat near her mother, Lady Eleanor. Her hands twisted her handkerchief, and Hastings noted the faint tremor in her fingers. Lady Eleanor placed a protective hand on her daughter's arm, her sapphire necklace catching the light. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice cool, you cannot seriously suspect my daughter. She's a child, incapable of such a thing. Poirot's gaze softened, but only slightly. Madame, I suspect no one. Yet, I observe. Mademoiselle Beatrice, you were on the terrace, you said. But the maid, Annie, saw you there upset. Why were you crying? Beatrice's eyes widened, and she glanced at her mother before answering. I wasn't crying, Mr. Poirot. It must have been the wind in my eyes. I told you I just needed air. Poirot nodded, but his silence spoke volumes. Hastings knew that look. Poirot had caught a thread and would pull until it unraveled. The detective turned to Lionel Wentworth, who slouched in a chair, his sullen demeanor unchanged. Monsieur Wentworth, you claim you never left the dining room, yet your mother, she is quick to confirm this. Too quick, perhaps. Did you perhaps step away? Lionel's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with defiance. I told you I stayed put. Mother's not lying. Why are you hounding us? Clara Wentworth's voice was sharp. My son is no murderer, Mr. Poirot. He's a poet, not a killer. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Poetry, madame, can conceal as much as it reveals. We shall see. The interviews continued, each guest deflecting suspicion with practiced ease. Dr. Travers, when questioned again, grew testy, insisting his brief absence to check his medical bag was routine. Miss Evelyn Price, the secretary, repeated her story about fetching a ledger, her voice steady but her fingers tightening around her pen. Margot Crane, the former actress, offered a theatrical sigh, claiming she'd seen nothing unusual during her time in the powder room. As the session drew to a close, Poirot requested to revisit the study, accompanied by Hastings and a reluctant Grayson. The room was unchanged, the air still heavy with the scent of whiskey and blood. Poirot moved to the desk, his gloved fingers tracing the edge where the papers had been scattered. Observe, Hastings, he said, pointing to a faint ink smudge on a letter. It is fresh, not yet dry. Someone wrote here recently, perhaps after the murder. Grayson scoffed. Could be Gray's own writing. You're seeing mysteries where there are none. Poirot's eyes twinkled. None, Inspector. The mysteries, they are everywhere. This ink, it matches the pen in Miss Price's ledger. And this... He knelt by the rug where the muddy footprint remained. It is clearer now in the daylight. The tread, it is distinctive, like that of a riding boot, but whose? Hastings frowned, his mind racing. Beatrice rides, doesn't she? Could it be hers? Poirot's expression was inscrutable. Perhaps, mon ami, but the size, it is too large for a lady's boot, yet too small for a man's. It is a puzzle within a puzzle. As they left the study, Poirot paused in the corridor where a portrait of a stern-faced Ashbourne ancestor glared down. "This house," he murmured, "it holds its secrets tightly. But the red herrings, they are beginning to scatter. The footman, he is too obvious. The alibis, too perfect. Someone wishes us to look one way while the truth lies elsewhere." Back in the library, Poirot addressed the guests once more. "Mes amis, I urge you to reflect. The truth, it cannot hide forever. If you know something, speak now, or the net of justice will close around you." The room fell silent, but Hastings saw the flickers of fear in their eyes. Beatrice's trembling hands, Lionel's clenched jaw, Miss Price's tightened grip on her ledger. The red herrings were indeed emerging, but Poirot's little gray cells were already cutting through the deception, inching closer to the heart of the mystery. As the guests dispersed, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "The killer, Hastings, is clever. They have laid a trail of false clues, but they have underestimated Hercule Poirot. Tomorrow we shall tighten the screws." The manor settled into an uneasy dusk, its secrets pulsing like a heartbeat, waiting for Poirot to expose them. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The morning mist clung stubbornly to the cliffs of Ravencliff Manor, wrapping the estate in a veil of secrecy that mirrored the tangled web of lies within its walls. The air inside was no less heavy, charged with the unspoken fears of the guests, each of whom moved through the day with the caution of those who sensed a trap closing. Hercule Poirot, however, was undeterred, his mind a sharpened blade slicing through the fog of deception. Captain Hastings, ever his faithful shadow, followed closely, his soldier's instinct attuned to the mounting tension, though he struggled to keep pace with Poirot's relentless logic. The library, where Poirot had taken to conducting his inquiries, was bathed in the pale light of late morning, its shelves of leather-bound tomes a silent audience to the unfolding drama. Poirot sat at the oak table, his notebook open, his pencil moving with the precision of a surgeon. Before him lay a small collection of objects retrieved from the study. The blood-smeared note, a fragment of the shattered whiskey decanter, and a single pearl earring, discovered that morning beneath the desk by a sharp-eyed maid. Each item, Poirot declared, was a thread in the tapestry of the crime, and he was determined to weave them together. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Hastings, his voice low and deliberate, "the clue, it is often in the detail, the small thing overlooked by the careless eye. This earring, for example, it is not merely a trinket, it is a whisper of the truth." Hastings leaned closer, examining the earring. It was delicate, a single pearl set in a silver filigree, its luster dulled by a faint speck of dust. "It could belong to any of the ladies," he said. "Lady Eleanor, Beatrice, Margot Crane, even Miss Price." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Oui, but it is not so simple. The earring, it was found beneath the desk, hidden from view. Why there? Was it dropped in a struggle or placed to mislead? And the note, 'Meet me at 9, trust no one,' its ink, it matches Miss Price's pen. Yet she claims she was in her room. The details, Hastings, they contradict." Before Hastings could respond, Inspector Grayson entered, his face flushed with the confidence of a man who believed he'd cracked the case. "Poirot, we've got something new," he announced, holding up a small leather pouch. Found this in the footman James's quarters. It's got Gray's initials on it, and inside... Look. He opened the pouch to reveal a handful of pound notes, crisp and neatly folded. A bribe, perhaps? Grayson continued, his tone triumphant. Or payment for silence. I'm bringing James in for questioning again. He's our man, mark my words. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet amusement. A pouch, Inspector, with money? It is convenient, no? Too convenient, perhaps. Let us see this, James, but I warn you, the truth is not so easily caught. James the footman was summoned once more, his face pale and his hands trembling as he stood before Poirot. I swear, sir, I don't know where that pouch came from, he stammered. I never saw it before. Someone must have put it in my room. Poirot's gaze was piercing. And who, James, would do such a thing? Someone who wishes to cast suspicion upon you, perhaps. Tell me, did you see anything unusual near the study that night? Anything at all? James hesitated, his eyes darting to Grayson, then back to Poirot. I didn't want to say before, sir, but I saw Mr. Crane, Victor Crane, near the study door just before 9. He was coming from the veranda, looked angry like he'd been in a row. Poirot made a note, his expression unreadable. Merci, James. You have been most helpful. You may go. As the footman left, Grayson snorted. He's pointing fingers to save himself. Crane's a loudmouth, but a murderer? I'm not convinced. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Conviction, Inspector, comes from evidence, not instinct. Let us speak with Monsieur Crane. Victor Crane strode into the library with the swagger of a man accustomed to command, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. What's this about, Poirot? He demanded. That footman's lying through his teeth. I was on the veranda smoking, like I said. Poirot tilted his head, his voice smooth. And yet, monsieur, the veranda is clean of ash. And James, he places you near the study. Tell me, did you know Thomas Gray well? Did he perhaps know something about your business dealings with Sir Reginald? Crane's face darkened. You're fishing, Poirot. Gray was a valet, nothing more. I barely spoke to him. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet you were seen, angry, near the scene of his, death. The earring, monsieur, do you recognize it? He held up the pearl, its surface catching the light. Crane's jaw tightened, but he shook his head. Never seen it before, you're wasting my time. As Crane left, Poirot turned to Hastings. The man, he is defensive, but not guilty, not yet. The earring, it does not belong to his wife, Margot. Her taste, it is for diamonds, not pearls. But Lady Eleanor, or Beatrice, or Miss Price. The next to be questioned was Miss Evelyn Price, her severe bun and spectacles giving her the air of a schoolmistress. She sat stiffly, her ledger clutched tightly. The earring is not mine, she said before Poirot could ask. I wear no jewelry, it's impractical. Poirot nodded, but his gaze lingered on her hands. And the ink, mademoiselle? The note found in the study, it matches your pen. Can you explain this? Miss Price's lips thinned. I write many notes for Sir Reginald. Perhaps Gray took one from my desk. I was in my room, as I told you. Poirot made a note, his pencil moving with deliberate care. Merci, mademoiselle. But the truth, it is like a pearl. It shines when brought to light. As Miss Price left, Poirot turned his attention to the shattered decanter fragment, its edge stained with a faint trace of whiskey. Hastings, he said. This decanter, it was broken deliberately, not in a struggle. The shards, they are too uniform as though struck with precision. And the whiskey, Why spill it? To mask another scent, perhaps? Hastings frowned, his mind racing. You think the killer was covering their tracks? Oui, Poirot replied. But the tracks, they are still there. The earring, the note, the footprint, they are clues, but also distractions. We must look beyond them. The afternoon wore on, and Poirot requested to see the terrace where Beatrice claimed to have been. The stone flags were swept clean, but Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers brushing the edge near the study window. Here, he said, pointing to a faint scuff mark, barely visible. A shoe, perhaps, scraping against the stone. It matches the footprint in the study, but it is not Beatrice's. Her shoes, they are delicate, not sturdy like this. Hastings' eyes widened. Then who? Lionel, Dr. Travers? Poirot's smile was cryptic. Patience, mon ami, the clue, it is in the detail, but the detail must be complete. We shall speak with Mademoiselle Beatrice again. Beatrice, when summoned, was visibly shaken, her green eyes red-rimmed. I've told you everything, she said, her voice trembling. Why do you keep asking me? Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. Because, mademoiselle, you were seen on the terrace, upset. And this earring, he held it up, watching her closely. It is yours, is it not? Beatrice's hand flew to her ear, her face paling. I lost it days ago. I didn't know it was in the study. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Days ago, you say? Yet it is clean, not dusty. The little gray cells, they wonder why. As Beatrice fled the room, Hastings turned to Poirot. She's lying, isn't she? The earring places her at the scene. Poirot nodded slowly. Perhaps, Hastings, but the earring, it is too obvious, like the pouch in James's room. Someone wishes us to suspect her. The truth, it lies in the contradictions. The manor hummed with secrets, and Poirot, with his relentless pursuit of detail, was closing in on the killer's shadow, one clue at a time. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The late afternoon light cast a somber glow over Ravencliff Manor, its golden hues muted by the ever-present mist that curled around the cliffs like a living thing. Inside, the air was thick with suspicion, the guests moving through the house with the guarded steps of those who knew they were watched, not only by Inspector Grayson's men but by the piercing gaze of Hercule Poirot. The murder of Thomas Gray had peeled back the veneer of civility, exposing raw nerves and hidden truths. Captain Hastings, standing in the library where Poirot continued his relentless inquiry, felt the weight of the mystery pressing down, each new revelation tightening the knot of intrigue. Poirot sat at the oak table, his notebook a mosaic of meticulous notes, his green-gray eyes alight with the quiet intensity of a man who saw not just people but the intricate dance of their motives. The pearl earring, the blood-smeared note, and the muddy footprint had become the cornerstones of his investigation, but new threads were emerging, each one tangled with deceit. Hastings, ever loyal but impatient, watched as Poirot prepared to unravel another layer of the puzzle. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate, the lies, they multiply like shadows in a storm. But each lie, it reveals a truth if one knows where to look. Today we shall probe deeper into the hearts of those who hide. Hastings nodded, though his mind churned with questions. That earring, Poirot, it's Beatrice's, isn't it? She admitted she lost it, but her story doesn't hold up. Poirot's mustache twitched. Oui, Hastings, but the earring, it is a distraction, perhaps. It is too convenient, like the pouch in James's room. We must seek the hidden motives, the affairs, the debts, the feuds that drive a man to kill. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Grayson, his face set in a scowl. "Poirot, I've had enough of your theatrics," he said, brandishing a telegram. "Just got word from London. Gray had a record. Petty theft years ago before he came to Ravencliff. I say he was blackmailing someone here and they silenced him." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Blackmail, Inspector? A possibility, yes. But the letter opener, the precision of the wound, it is not the act of a panicked victim. It is calculated. Let us speak with those who knew Gray best." The first to be summoned was Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, her ethereal beauty marred by the strain of the past 2 days. She sat with regal composure, her sapphire necklace glinting like a beacon. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "I've told you all I know. Thomas was loyal, discreet. I can't imagine who would want him dead." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Madam, you mentioned Gray spoke with your daughter Beatrice in hushed tones. Was there perhaps a connection between them? A secret they shared?" Lady Eleanor's hand tightened around her handkerchief. "Beatrice is young, impressionable. If she spoke with Thomas, it was about trivial matters. Books, perhaps. She's no murderer." Poirot made a note, his pencil moving with deliberate care. "And your husband, madam? Sir Reginald spoke of Gray knowing things about this house. What things, do you think?" Her eyes flickered, a shadow passing across them. "Reginald is under strain, his business, his health. He may have exaggerated. Thomas was a valet, nothing more." As she left, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The lady, she protects her daughter and perhaps her husband, but there is fear in her eyes. We must press further." Next came Sir Reginald himself, his silver hair disheveled, his brandy glass replaced by a cigarette that trembled in his hand. "Poirot, this is madness," he said, his voice hoarse. "Gray was loyal, but he was nosy. He overheard things. Business matters, private matters. I told him to keep his mouth shut." Poirot's voice was soft but insistent. "And what matters, monsieur? Your partnership with Victor Crane, perhaps? Or something closer to home?" Sir Reginald's face darkened. "Crane's a brash fool, but our deal is solid. As for home, my family is my own business. You're digging in the wrong place, Poirot." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The place, monsieur, is always the right one when the little gray cells guide me." "Merci." As Sir Reginald stormed out, Hastings frowned. "He's hiding something, Poirot. That business with Crane, could Gray have known something damaging?" "Perhaps," Poirot replied. "But the heart of this crime, it is personal. Let us speak with Monsieur Wentworth." Lionel Wentworth slouched into the room, his poet's eyes shadowed with resentment. "What now, Poirot?" he muttered. "I've told you I was at the table. I didn't know Gray well." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And yet, monsieur, your mother is quick to defend you. Why? Is there a secret you share? A feud, perhaps, with the Ashbournes?" Lionel's jaw tightened. "My mother's protective, that's all. The Ashbournes, they're not as perfect as they seem. Beatrice, she's got her own troubles." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Troubles, you say? With Thomas Gray, perhaps?" Lionel hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know. She was upset lately, that's all I'll say." As Lionel left, Poirot made a note, his expression thoughtful. "The young man, he knows more than he says. And Beatrice, She is at the center of this web. The interviews continued, revealing cracks in the carefully constructed facades. Margot Crane, when questioned, admitted to overhearing an argument between Sir Reginald and Grey a week prior, though she claimed it was about household matters. Dr. Travers grew evasive when pressed about his medical bag, insisting it contained only routine supplies. Miss Price, her ledger ever present, denied any connection to the blood-smeared note, though her fingers trembled as she spoke. Poirot, undeterred, requested to revisit the study. The room was as they had left it, the air still heavy with the ghost of violence. Poirot knelt by the desk, his gloved fingers tracing the edge where the pearl earring had been found. "Hastings," he said. "This earring, it is Beatrice's, yes, but it was placed here. The dust beneath the desk, it is undisturbed except for this one spot. Someone wished it to be found." Hastings' eyes widened. "A frame-up, then? But who?" Poirot's gaze shifted to the window, where the faint mud smudge remained. The footprint, the earring, the note, they are pieces of a performance. But there is another clue, one we have overlooked. He pointed to a small brass key, half hidden beneath a pile of papers. "This key, it is not from the study. It is too small, too delicate. Perhaps it unlocks a secret." Hastings frowned. "A secret compartment? A diary?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. "We shall see." As they left the study, Poirot paused in the corridor where a maid was sweeping the floor. "Annie," he called softly, beckoning the young woman who had discovered Grey's body. "This key, do you recognize it?" Annie's eyes widened, her hands trembling. It looks like one from the attic, sir. There's a locked chest up there. Miss Beatrice uses it for her old letters." Poirot's smile was triumphant. "Merci, Annie. You have been most helpful." As the maid hurried away, Hastings turned to Poirot. "Beatrice's chest? Could it hold the answer?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The answer, Hastings, is in the lies that surface, the earring, the key, the argument. They point to Beatrice, but also away from her. Someone weaves a net, but the little gray cells, they see through it." The manor pulsed with secrets, and Poirot, with his relentless pursuit of truth, was closing in on the killer's shadow, one lie at a time. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The evening shadows stretched long across Ravencliff Manor, their dark fingers creeping over the polished floors as if to grasp the secrets buried within its walls. The air was heavy with the scent of impending rain, the distant rumble of thunder echoing the turmoil that gripped the household. The murder of Thomas Grey had unraveled the delicate threads of civility, leaving the guests raw and exposed, their guarded facades crumbling under the weight of suspicion. Hercule Poirot, with his unerring logic, stood as a beacon in the gathering storm, his little gray cells working tirelessly to pierce the veil of deceit. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a moment where truth, long suppressed, might finally break free. The library, Poirot's chosen arena for his inquiries, was dimly lit by gas lamps, their flickering glow casting eerie patterns on the walls. The guests had been summoned once more, their faces a gallery of unease as they took their seats around the oak table. Poirot stood at its head, his small frame commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. His notebook lay open, its pages dense with notes, but it was his eyes, sharp, unrelenting, that held the room captive. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady and resonant. We stand at a crossroads. The death of Thomas Gray is not a mere act of violence. It is a story, written in blood and deception. Tonight, one of you will reveal a truth, whether you wish it or not. The little gray cells, they demand it. A murmur of protest rippled through the room, but it was quickly silenced by Poirot's raised hand. Hastings, standing near a bookcase, noted the tension in each face. Lady Eleanor's rigid composure, Beatrice's trembling hands, Lionel Wentworth's sullen defiance, Victor Crane's clenched jaw, Margot Crane's theatrical poise, Dr. Travers' furrowed brow, and Miss Price's tightly gripped ledger. Inspector Grayson, leaning against the door frame, snorted softly, his skepticism a constant undercurrent. Poirot's gaze settled on Beatrice Ashbourne, whose green eyes were wide with fear. "Mademoiselle Beatrice," he said, his tone gentle but firm, "you have been at the heart of this mystery. The earring found in the study is yours. The maid Annie saw you on the terrace, upset. And now, a key to a chest in the attic where you keep your letters. What do these letters contain, mademoiselle? Why do you hide?" Beatrice's face crumpled, her hands flying to her mouth as a sob escaped. "I didn't kill him," she cried, her voice breaking. "Thomas, he was kind to me. He knew about my feelings. I told him things I shouldn't have, but I didn't kill him." Lady Eleanor rose, her sapphire necklace glinting as she placed a protective arm around her daughter. "Mr. Poirot, this is cruel. Beatrice is innocent. She's a girl, not a murderer." Poirot's eyes softened, but his resolve was unshaken. "Madame, I seek only the truth. Mademoiselle Beatrice, these feelings, they were for whom? And what did Thomas Gray know that made him a target?" Beatrice's sobs grew louder, her words tumbling out in a rush. I was in love. Not with Thomas, but with someone else. I wrote letters, foolish letters, and Thomas found them. He promised to keep my secret, but he warned me, said someone else knew, someone dangerous. The room fell silent, the weight of her confession hanging like a storm cloud. Hastings felt a jolt of surprise, his mind racing to connect the dots. "Who, Beatrice?" he asked, unable to contain himself. "Who were you in love with?" Beatrice shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't say, I won't. But Thomas didn't deserve to die." Poirot's gaze shifted to the others, his voice cutting through the tension. "A secret, then. A secret worth killing for. Who among you knew of these letters? Who felt threatened by Thomas Gray's knowledge?" Victor Crane stood, his face flushed with anger. "This is nonsense, Poirot. You're turning a girl's hysterics into a conspiracy. I didn't know Gray, and I don't care about some love letters." Margot Crane, her eyes sharp, placed a hand on her husband's arm. "Calm down, Victor. Mr. Poirot is only doing his job. But Beatrice, dear, you must tell us who. It could help." Beatrice shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't. It's too dangerous." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind clearly racing. "Dangerous, mademoiselle? Then let us consider. The key to the attic chest, where is it now?" Beatrice's hand flew to her pocket, then froze. I don't know. I thought I had it, but it's gone." Poirot nodded as though expecting this. "The key. It was found in the study near the body. Someone placed it there, perhaps to implicate you, mademoiselle, or to hide something else." Inspector Grayson, who had been silent, stepped forward. "Enough of this, Poirot. The girl's clearly involved. Those letters, probably blackmail material. She stabbed Gray to keep him quiet." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of disdain. "Non, Inspector. The letters, they are a motive, but not for Beatrice. She is a victim, not a killer. The earring, the key, they are planted to mislead. But the truth, it begins to emerge. Poirot turned to Lionel Wentworth, whose sullen demeanor had given way to a nervous fidgeting. Monsieur Wentworth, you spoke of Beatrice's troubles. Did you know of these letters? Were you perhaps the object of her affections? Lionel's eyes widened, his face paling. Me? No, I barely know her. She's just a spoiled girl. I don't know anything about letters. Clara Wentworth's voice was sharp. Leave my son alone, Mr. Poirot. He's done nothing wrong. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps, madam, but the lies, they pile up. Let us consider another possibility. He turned to Dr. Travers, whose brow was furrowed deeper than ever. Doctor, you were near the study, checking your medical bag. Did you perhaps see these letters? Or hear something you should not? Travers' fingers drummed on the table, his voice tight. I told you I was only gone a moment. I didn't see anything or anyone. Poirot's gaze shifted to Miss Price, whose ledger lay closed before her. And you, mademoiselle? Your pen matched the ink of the note found in the study. Did you write it? Or did someone use your pen to create a false trail? Miss Price's lips tightened, her spectacles glinting. I've said it before, Mr. Poirot. I was in my room. I don't know how my pen was used. The room pulsed with tension, each guest eyeing the other, searching for the crack that would betray the guilty. Poirot, sensing the moment, pressed harder. Mes amis, the truth is close. Thomas Gray died because he knew too much. A secret that threatened someone in this room. The letters, the earring, the key. They are pieces of a puzzle, but the heart of it lies in the human soul. Who among you felt the weight of his knowledge? Beatrice's sobs broke the silence, her voice raw. It was my fault. If I hadn't written those letters, Thomas would still be alive. Lady Eleanor pulled her daughter close, her own composure cracking. Beatrice, stop, you've said enough. Poirot's eyes gleamed with triumph. Non, madame. She has not said enough, but she has said something. The letters, they are the key. Not to the chest, but to the motive. We shall find them, and with them, the truth. As the guests were dismissed, their faces a mixture of relief and dread, Poirot turned to Hastings. The girl, she has broken, mon ami. Her confession, it is partial, but it is the turning point. The letters, they hold the secret. Tomorrow we shall find this chest. Hastings frowned, his mind racing. But who, Poirot? Who was she writing to? Poirot's smile was cryptic. The little gray cells, they whisper, Hastings. The answer is close, hidden in the shadows of this house. The manor settled into a restless night, its secrets teetering on the edge of revelation, as Poirot prepared to tighten the net around the killer. Chapter 9. The Trap Tightens. The morning dawned over Ravencliff Manor with the sky bruised by storm clouds, the air heavy with the promise of rain. The cliffs beyond the windows seemed to loom closer, their jagged edges a silent warning of the peril within the house. The murder of Thomas Gray had woven a web of suspicion that ensnared every guest, and the emotional outpouring of Beatrice Ashbourne the previous evening had cracked the facade of civility, exposing raw nerves and hidden truths. Hercule Poirot, with his unyielding logic, was ready to tighten the net, his little gray cells poised to trap the guilty. Captain Hastings, standing by the library window, felt the tension coiling tighter, sensing that the truth was within reach, yet still shrouded in shadow. Poirot had requested a gathering in the drawing room, a grand space with velvet drapes and a massive fireplace, its hearth cold despite the chill in the air. The guests assembled reluctantly, their faces etched with exhaustion and dread. Inspector Grayson, ever skeptical, stood by the door, his notebook clutched like a talisman. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small frame radiating authority, his green-gray eyes scanning the room with the precision of a hawk. In his hand he held the small brass key found in the study, its delicate form a stark contrast to the weight of its significance. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding, "we are close to the truth. The death of Thomas Gray was no random act. It was a performance, staged to conceal a secret. The earring, the note, the key, these are props, but the motive lies in the heart. Last night, Mademoiselle Beatrice revealed a truth. Letters hidden in an attic chest hold the key to this crime. Today we shall find them, and with them, the killer." A gasp rippled through the room. Beatrice, seated beside her mother, Lady Eleanor, clutched her handkerchief, her face pale. "Mr. Poirot," she whispered, "I've told you everything. Please don't make this worse." Lady Eleanor's voice was sharp. "This is outrageous, Mr. Poirot. My daughter is no murderer." "You're tormenting her." Poirot's expression was sympathetic but unyielding. "Madame, I seek only justice. The letters, they are the heart of this mystery. We shall go to the attic now, and you, Mademoiselle Beatrice, will show us this chest." Inspector Grayson stepped forward, his scowl deepening. "Poirot, this is a waste of time. The footman, James, is our man. That pouch of money in his room, it's proof enough. Why chase after love letters?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of quiet disdain. "Proof, Inspector? The pouch, it is too convenient, like the earring, like the note. No, the truth lies elsewhere. Let us proceed." The group moved to the attic, a dim, dusty space reached by a narrow staircase. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories, the floorboards creaking underfoot. Beatrice, trembling, led them to a corner where a small, locked chest sat beneath a cobwebbed window. The brass key fit perfectly, and Poirot turned it with a soft click, lifting the lid to reveal a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears as Poirot carefully untied the bundle, his gloved fingers handling the letters with reverence. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "these letters, who were they written to?" Beatrice shook her head, her voice barely audible. "I can't say, it's too shameful." Poirot's gaze softened, but he pressed on, scanning the topmost letter. "They are addressed to my dearest," he said, his voice low. "No name but the words, they speak of love and fear. Fear of discovery. Who, mademoiselle, did you fear?" Before Beatrice could answer, Lionel Wentworth, who had been silent, stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Leave her alone, Poirot, you're bullying her." "Those letters are private." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Private, Monsieur Wentworth. Yet they are at the heart of a murder. Did you know of them? Were you perhaps their recipient?" Lionel's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. "No, I told you I barely know her. You're twisting everything." Clara Wentworth, her mourning black stark against the attic's gloom, placed a hand on her son's arm. "Lionel, hush. Mr. Poirot, my son has nothing to do with this. He's a poet, not a killer." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Poetry, madame, can hide a multitude of sins. But let us consider others." He turned to Victor Crane, whose brash demeanor had given way to a nervous fidgeting. Monsieur Crane, you were seen near the study, angry. Did Gray know something about your business dealings with Sir Reginald? Something, perhaps, in these letters? Crane's face reddened. I told you I was smoking on the veranda. Gray was nothing to me. You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. Margot Crane, her eyes sharp, interjected. Victor's right, Mr. Poirot. He's loud, but he's no murderer. Perhaps you should look at the family. Secrets tend to fester there. Poirot's gaze shifted to Doctor Travers, whose fingers drummed a restless rhythm. And you, Doctor? You were near the study checking your bag. Did you see these letters or perhaps overhear something you should not? Travers' brow furrowed. I've told you I saw nothing. My bag was in the hall and I was back at the table in minutes. Finally, Poirot turned to Miss Evelyn Price, her ledger clutched like a shield. Mademoiselle, the note in the study, its ink matched your pen. Did you write it or was it taken to implicate another? Miss Price's lips thinned, her spectacles glinting. I've said it before, Mr. Poirot. I was in my room. Someone must have used my pen. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. The letters, they will tell us more, but first we must return to the study. There is one detail yet to examine. The group descended to the study where the air still held the faint tang of whiskey and blood. Poirot moved to the desk, his gloved fingers tracing the edge where the papers had been scattered. Observe, Hastings, he said, pointing to a faint scratch on the desk's surface, barely visible in the dim light. This mark, it is new. Something was removed, a drawer, perhaps, or a hidden compartment. Hastings frowned, peering at the scratch. A compartment? For what? Poirot's eyes gleamed. For something the killer wished to hide or to find. The letters, they are part of the puzzle, but there is more. The key, the earring, the note, they are threads, but the weave is incomplete. Inspector Grayson, growing impatient, snorted. You're chasing shadows, Poirot. The letters point to Beatrice and the pouch points to James. Why complicate things? Poirot's voice was calm but firm. Because, Inspector, the truth is never simple. The killer, they are clever, but they have made a mistake. The little gray cells, they see it. As the guests were dismissed, their faces a mix of relief and fear, Poirot lingered in the study, his gaze fixed on the window where the mud smudge remained. Hastings, he said softly, the trap is set. The letters, they have stirred the killer's fear. Tonight they will act, and we shall be ready. Hastings felt a chill, his mind racing. You're baiting them, aren't you? Using the letters to force their hand. Poirot's smile was cryptic. Oui, mon ami, the killer. They watch, they wait. But the net, it tightens, and soon they will have nowhere to hide. The manor pulsed with unspoken truths, and Poirot, with his relentless logic, was ready to spring the trap, one careful step at a time. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The storm that had threatened Ravencliff Manor all day broke at last, its rain lashing the windows with a fury that mirrored the tempest within. Thunder rumbled over the Cornish cliffs, shaking the ancient stones of the house as if urging the truth to surface. The drawing room, where Hercule Poirot had summoned the guests for a final reckoning, was a crucible of tension, its gas lamps casting flickering shadows that danced like specters of guilt. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his heart pounding, knowing that Poirot's methodical mind had reached its climax. The little gray cells, so often underestimated, were about to unveil the killer of Thomas Gray. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small frame radiating an authority that silenced the room. The guests sat in a semicircle, their faces pale and strained. Lady Eleanor, her sapphire necklace glinting, Beatrice clutching her handkerchief, Sir Reginald, his silver hair disheveled, Lionel Wentworth, sullen and defiant, Clara Wentworth, her mourning black stark, Victor Crane, his bravado faded, Margot Crane, poised but watchful, Dr. Travers, his fingers still, and Miss Evelyn Price, her ledger closed. Inspector Grayson, arms crossed, stood by the window, his skepticism warring with curiosity. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, the murder of Thomas Gray is a puzzle, but it is now complete. The clues, the earring, the note, the key, the footprint, they were threads in a tapestry of deception. Tonight I, Hercule Poirot, will reveal the truth step by step, and the killer, they will stand exposed. A murmur of unease rippled through the room, but Poirot's raised hand silenced it. Let us begin with the crime, he said. Thomas Gray was stabbed in the study between 9 and 10 with a letter opener. The wound, it was precise, not the act of impulse, but of intent. The room was disturbed, papers scattered, a decanter shattered, but these were staged to suggest a struggle. The truth, it was calmer, more deliberate. Poirot paced slowly, his eyes scanning each face. The clues, they were many. The muddy footprint, too small for a man's boot, too large for a lady's. The pearl earring belonging to Mademoiselle Beatrice found beneath the desk. The note, "Meet me at 9. Trust no one," written in ink matching Miss Price's pen, the key to an attic chest of letters, and the pouch of money found in James's room. Each clue it pointed to someone, yet also away. Why? Because the killer, they are clever. Beatrice stifled a sob, and Lady Eleanor gripped her hand. Poirot continued undeterred. Let us consider the alibis. Each of you was absent from the dining room at some point. Mademoiselle Beatrice on the terrace, Dr. Travers in the hall, Monsieur Crane on the veranda, Madame Crane in the powder room, Mademoiselle Price in her room. All near the study, yet no one saw another. Impossible, no? Someone lies. Inspector Grayson snorted. It's the footman, James. The pouch proves it. Blackmail gone wrong. Poirot's mustache twitched. No, Inspector, the pouch. It is a red herring placed to mislead. James, he is innocent. The true motive lies elsewhere, in the letters. He held up the bundle from the attic chest, their ribbon loosened. These letters, written by Mademoiselle Beatrice, speak of love, but also of fear. Fear of a secret exposed. But to whom were they written? Beatrice's face crumpled, but Poirot's gaze shifted to Lionel Wentworth. Monsieur Wentworth, you claim no connection to Beatrice, yet you spoke of her troubles. Did you know of these letters? Were you their recipient? Lionel's eyes flashed with panic. No, I told you, I barely know her. Clara Wentworth's voice was sharp. Leave my son alone, Mr. Poirot. He's done nothing. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps, madame. But let us consider another thread. He turned to Victor Crane. Monsieur Crane, you were seen near the study, angry. Gray knew something of your business with Sir Reginald. A deal, perhaps, that was not as honest as it seemed. Crane's face reddened. That's slander, Poirot. My deal with Ashbourne is clean. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Is it? Gray, he was nosy, as Sir Reginald said. He overheard things. Perhaps a plan to defraud or a debt unpaid. But this, it is not the heart of the crime. He turned to Miss Price, whose spectacles glinted in the lamplight. Mademoiselle Price, your pen wrote the note. You claim it was taken, but your ledger, it is always with you. Did you write the note to lure Gray to his death? Miss Price's lips thinned. I did not. Someone used my pen. I was in my room. Poirot nodded, then faced Dr. Travers. And you, doctor? Your medical bag, it was in the hall near the study. Did you see something or do something? Travers' brow furrowed. I've told you I saw nothing. I was back at the table in minutes. Poirot's gaze swept the room, then settled on Lady Eleanor. Madame, you protect your daughter, but also your husband. Sir Reginald spoke of Gray knowing things. What things? A family secret, perhaps? Lady Eleanor's hand tightened on Beatrice's. You're grasping at shadows, Mr. Poirot. Poirot's voice softened, but his words were relentless. Non, madame. The shadows, they clear. The earring, it was Beatrice's, but placed to implicate her. The key, it led us to the letters, but it was dropped deliberately. The footprint, it matches no one's shoes, because it was made with a boot taken from the stables, then returned. The killer they wished to confuse, to distract. But they made one mistake. He paused, letting the silence build. The whiskey decanter shattered on the floor. Its shards, they were too uniform, struck with precision to mask another scent. Laudanum, a sedative. Gray was drugged before he was stabbed to ensure he could not resist. And who among you has access to laudanum? All eyes turned to Dr. Travers, whose face paled. You can't mean... My bag was in the hall, yes, but anyone could have taken it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Anyone, yes. But only one had motive, means, and opportunity. The killer is you, Doctor. Malcolm Travers. A gasp filled the room. Travers stood, his hands shaking. This is absurd. I'm a doctor, not a murderer. Poirot's voice was calm but unyielding. You were in love with Beatrice, Doctor. The letters, they were to you. Gray found them, threatened to tell Sir Reginald, who would never approve. You lured Gray to the study with the note, drugged him with laudanum from your bag, and stabbed him with the letter opener. You planted the earring, the key, the footprint to point to Beatrice, to James, to anyone but you. But the laudanum, it betrayed you. Travers' face crumpled, his defiance collapsing. I didn't mean to kill him. He was going to ruin everything. Beatrice, she didn't know. I did it for her. Beatrice's sob broke the silence, and Lady Eleanor pulled her close. Sir Reginald's face was ashen, his hands clenched. Grayson, stunned, stepped forward to cuff Travers, who offered no resistance. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. The little gray cells, mon ami, they see what others miss. The heart, it betrays the guilty. The storm raged outside, but within Ravencliff the truth had broken free, leaving only the echoes of a killer's confession. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The storm that had battered Ravencliff Manor through the night had retreated by morning, leaving behind a sky of bruised clouds and a sea that churned restlessly against the Cornish cliffs. The air inside the manor was no less unsettled, though the revelation of Dr. Malcolm Travers as Thomas Gray's killer had lifted the suffocating veil of suspicion. The guests, shaken by the dramatic unmasking, moved through the house with a quiet weariness, their voices hushed as if the walls themselves might carry their words to judgment. Hercule Poirot, however, remained a figure of calm resolve. his work complete but his mind still turning over the intricacies of human nature. Captain Hastings, standing by the drawing-room window, felt a mix of relief and melancholy, knowing that Poirot's triumph, as always, came with a deeper reflection on the frailties of the heart. The drawing-room where the final confrontation had unfolded was now a place of quiet aftermath. The gas lamps were unlit, their glow replaced by the pale daylight filtering through the velvet drapes. Poirot sat in an armchair by the fireplace, his hands folded neatly, his green-gray eyes distant but alert. His notebook, so often his companion, lay closed on the table, its pages a silent testament to the puzzle he had solved. Hastings, sensing the moment for introspection, joined his friend, taking a seat opposite. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "you've done it again. Traverse, I never would have guessed. The laudanum, the letters, the earring, it was all so cleverly hidden. But how did you know?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon ami, it is always the same. The truth it hides in the contradictions and the details that do not fit. The little gray cells, they see what the heart wishes to conceal. Dr. Travers, he was a man of science, but also of passion. His love for Mademoiselle Beatrice, it drove him to madness." Hastings nodded, his mind replaying the events of the previous evening. "Poor Beatrice, she's devastated. To think Travers killed Gray to protect her secret, it's tragic." Poirot's expression grew somber. "Oui, Hastings, love, it is a powerful force, but it can twist the soul. Travers believed he was saving Beatrice, but he destroyed himself. The letters, they were his undoing. Gray, he knew too much, and Travers could not bear the thought of exposure." The room fell silent save for the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. Hastings glanced at the assembled guests, who had gathered in small groups in the hall, their voices muted. Beatrice, pale and red-eyed, sat with her mother, Lady Eleanor, whose protective arm never left her daughter's shoulders. Sir Reginald, his face etched with exhaustion, stood by a window, staring out at the sea. Lionel Wentworth and his mother, Clara, spoke in low tones, their sullenness softened by relief. Victor Crane, his bravado returning, was regaling Margot with a loud recounting of the night's events while she listened with a faint, amused smile. Miss Evelyn Price, her ledger tucked away, stood apart, her expression unreadable. Inspector Grayson, who had been humbled by Poirot's brilliance, approached, his notebook tucked under his arm. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his tone grudging but respectful, "I'll admit, you've got a knack for this. I was dead set on the footman, but you saw through it all. That laudanum business, clever." Poirot inclined his head, his voice polite but firm. "Merci, Inspector, but it is not cleverness alone. It is method, observation, and the understanding of the human heart. The clues, they were many, the earring, the note, the key, but they were distractions. The laudanum, it was the truth hidden in plain sight." Grayson nodded, then hesitated. "What about the letters? Should we seize them as evidence?" Poirot's eyes softened. "No, Inspector, the letters, they are private, the outpourings of a young girl's heart. They have served their purpose in revealing the motive. Let them remain with Mademoiselle Beatrice, to remind her of the cost of secrets." Grayson shrugged, clearly out of his depth, and took his leave to oversee Travers' transfer to the village jail. Hastings watched him go, then turned to Poirot. "You're letting her keep the letters, after all they caused?" Poirot's gaze was distant, fixed on the fireplace where embers had long since died. "The letters, Hastings, they are not the crime. They are the spark that lit the flame, but the flame was Travers' own. To punish Beatrice further, it would be unjust. She has suffered enough." Hastings leaned back, his mind turning to the broader implications. "You always say it's about psychology, Poirot." Travers seemed so composed, so professional. "How did you see through him?" Poirot's smile was wistful. "The human heart, mon ami, it betrays itself in small ways. Travers, he was too quick to dismiss his time in the hall, too careful in his answers. His fingers, they drummed when he spoke of his medical bag, a sign of nerves. And the laudanum, it was his domain. No one else had such easy access. The earring, the key, the footprint, they were meant to point to Beatrice, to James, to anyone but him. But the little gray cells, they saw the pattern." The door opened and Lady Eleanor entered, her face pale but composed. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "I owe you my gratitude. You've saved my daughter from ruin, though the cost, it's more than I can bear." Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "Madame, I seek only the truth. Your daughter, she is young and her heart will heal. But guard her secrets better in the future, for they are dangerous things." Lady Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening, and left to rejoin Beatrice. As the door closed, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "This case, Hastings, it reminds me of a truth I have long held. The heart, it is both the source of love and the seed of destruction. Travers loved, but his love was possessive, desperate. It led him to murder and now to his own downfall." Hastings frowned, his soldier's pragmatism surfacing. "But what now, Poirot? The case is solved. Travers is in custody. Will you stay?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, a spark of his usual vigor returning. "Non, mon ami. The truth is found, the puzzle complete. Tomorrow we return to London. The sea air, it is charming, but it lacks the order of my little flat. And the claret here, it is not to my taste." Hastings chuckled, relieved to see Poirot's humor resurface. "You and your claret. But you're right. This place feels haunted now. I'll be glad to leave." As the guests began to disperse, their weekend at Ravenscliff forever altered, Poirot gathered his notebook and hat, his movements precise and deliberate. "Come, Hastings," he said, his voice light but firm. "The train awaits, and there are other puzzles in the world, waiting for Hercule Poirot." They stepped into the hall where the manor's grandeur seemed diminished, its opulence overshadowed by the tragedy it had witnessed. The cliffs outside stood silent, their secret safe once more, but Poirot's quiet exit left an indelible mark, a reminder that no secret could hide from the little gray cells. Chapter 12. The Unsettled Shadows. The morning at Ravenscliff Manor was cloaked in a quiet unease, as though the house itself were reluctant to release the echoes of the tragedy that had unfolded. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky of pale gray, its light filtering through the tall windows to cast a somber glow over the polished floors. The guests, though freed from the immediate threat of suspicion, moved with a lingering wariness, their conversations hushed and their glances guarded. The revelation of Dr. Malcolm Travers as Thomas Gray's killer had brought resolution, but not peace. Hercule Poirot, ever the observer of human nature, sensed the undercurrents of unresolved tensions, his little gray cells still alert to the shadows that lingered. Captain Hastings, standing in the great hall, felt a restlessness, as if the manor held one final secret yet to be uncovered. Poirot stood by the grand staircase, his small frame impeccable in his neatly pressed suit, his mustache waxed to perfection. His green-gray eyes surveyed the hall, taking in the details, the faded grandeur of the chandelier, the portraits of stern, ash-born ancestors, the faint scuff marks on the floor where nervous feet had paced. Hastings approached, his expression a mix of relief and curiosity. "Poirot," he said, "the case is solved. Travers is in custody, and we're set to leave for London this afternoon. Yet you look as if you're still hunting for something." Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. "Mon ami, the case, it is solved, oui. But the human heart, it does not resolve so easily. There are ripples still, questions unanswered, not about the murder, but about the souls within this house. The little gray cells, they sense a discord." Hastings frowned, his soldier's instinct piqued. "Discord? What do you mean?" Travers confessed. "The letters, the laudanum, the earring. It all fits." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It fits, yes, but the puzzle, it is not complete. There is a shadow, Hastings, a shadow of motive, of connection that lingers. Come, we shall walk the grounds before we depart. The air, it clears the mind." They stepped out into the gardens where the sea breeze carried the tang of salt and the distant cry of gulls. The cliffs loomed nearby, their jagged edges softened by the morning mist. Poirot moved with his usual precision, his cane tapping lightly on the gravel path, but his gaze was distant, as though seeing beyond the physical world. "This manor," he said softly, "it is a place of secrets, not all of which are tied to murder. The letters of Mademoiselle Beatrice, they revealed love but also fear. And Sir Reginald, his silence, it speaks louder than his words." Hastings glanced at his friend, puzzled. "Sir Reginald?" "He was shaken, certainly, but he's not the killer. What are you getting at?" Poirot paused by a rose bush, its blooms wilting in the damp air. "The business with Monsieur Crane, Hastings. Sir Reginald spoke of Gray knowing things. The letters were Travers' motive, but what of the business dealings? The little gray cells, they wonder if there is another secret, one that Gray stumbled upon." As they rounded a corner, they came upon Victor Crane, standing alone by a stone bench, his cigar smoke curling into the air. His brash demeanor had returned, but there was a tightness around his eyes. "Poirot," he said, nodding curtly, "heard you're leaving. Good work on Travers, nasty business, but you sorted it." Poirot inclined his head, his voice polite but probing. "Merci, Monsieur Crane. But tell me, your partnership with Sir Reginald, it is a mining venture, yes? Gray, he was nosy, as Sir Reginald said. Did he know something of this venture?" Crane's cigar paused mid-air, his eyes narrowing. "Gray was a valet, nothing more. My deal with Ashbourne is above board. You're fishing again, Poirot." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, monsieur, but the fish, they swim in murky waters. If there is nothing to hide, then there is nothing to fear." Crane muttered something under his breath and stalked off, leaving a trail of smoke. Hastings watched him go, then turned to Poirot. "You think he's hiding something? Another motive?" Poirot's gaze followed Crane's retreating figure. "Not a motive for murder, perhaps, but a secret, oui. The business, it is not as clean as he claims. Gray, he overheard something, perhaps a detail of fraud or a debt. It did not lead to his death, but it adds to the shadows." They continued their walk, passing the terrace where Beatrice had claimed to seek air on the night of the murder. Poirot paused, his eyes scanning the stone flags. "The scuff mark, Hastings," he said, pointing to the faint trace they had found earlier. "It was not Beatrice's nor Travers. It is a detail, small but persistent. Someone else was here watching, perhaps." Hastings frowned, his mind racing. "You mean someone else knew what Travers was planning? An accomplice?" Poirot shook his head. "No, not an accomplice. A witness, perhaps, who chose silence. The manor, it holds many eyes." As they returned to the house, they encountered Miss Evelyn Price standing in the hall with her ledger, her spectacles glinting in the dim light. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice crisp, "I understand you're departing. I trust the matter is settled?" Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "The matter of the murder, oui, mademoiselle. But you are observant. Did you see something that night near the study that you have not shared?" Miss Price's fingers tightened on her ledger, her expression unreadable. "I've told you everything, Mr. Poirot. I was in my room fetching a ledger. I saw nothing." Poirot nodded, but his gaze lingered. "The ink, mademoiselle, it matched your pen. A small thing, but it nags at the little gray cells. If you remember anything, you will tell me, oui?" She gave a curt nod and hurried away, her footsteps echoing in the hall. Hastings watched her go, then turned to Poirot. "She's hiding something, isn't she?" "You've got that look." Poirot's smile was faint. "The look, mon ami. It is merely the little gray cells stirring. Miss Price, she sees more than she says. But for now, it is not our concern. The murder is solved, and we must leave the shadows to the manor." They returned to the drawing room, where the guests were preparing for their own departures. Lady Eleanor and Beatrice stood together, their faces drawn but relieved. Sir Reginald, his composure restored, offered Poirot a stiff handshake. "You've done us a service, Mr. Poirot," he said, "though I wish it hadn't come to this." Poirot bowed slightly. "Monsieur, the truth, it is a heavy burden, but it sets us free. Guard your family well." As the guests dispersed, Poirot gathered his belongings, his movements precise and deliberate. Hastings, packing his own bag, felt a pang of unease. "Poirot, are you sure it's over? You keep talking about shadows, secrets. What if there's more?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, a spark of his usual vigor returning. "There is always more, Hastings. The human heart, it is a labyrinth, but for now our task is done. The train to London awaits, and I long for the order of my little flat." They stepped out into the courtyard where a car waited to take them to the station. The manor loomed behind them, its stone walls silent but heavy with the weight of its secrets. As they drove away, Hastings glanced back, the cliffs fading into the mist. "Ravencliff will never be the same," he said. Poirot's voice was soft but firm. "Non, mon ami, but the truth, it leaves its mark, and Hercule Poirot, he does not forget." The car wound through the Cornish lanes, carrying them away from the shadows of Ravencliff. But Hastings knew that Poirot's mind, ever restless, was already turning to the next puzzle, wherever it might lie. Chapter 13. The Lingering Echoes. The afternoon sun struggled to pierce the thick clouds over Ravencliff Manor, casting a muted light across the Cornish landscape. The cliffs, ever watchful, stood sentinel as the sea whispered its ceaseless secrets below. Inside the manor, a fragile calm had settled. but it was a calm born of exhaustion rather than resolution. The arrest of Dr. Malcolm Travers for the murder of Thomas Gray had lifted the immediate weight of suspicion. Yet the air remained heavy with unspoken truths. Hercule Poirot, with his unerring sense for the nuances of human behavior, sensed that the manor still held echoes of secrets not fully revealed. Captain Hastings, preparing for their departure to London, felt a restless unease, as though the house were reluctant to let them go without one final whisper. Poirot stood in the great hall, his small frame a stark contrast to the towering portraits of Ashbourne ancestors that lined the walls. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his mustache was immaculate, but his green-gray eyes were distant as if tracing the threads of a puzzle not yet fully unraveled. Hastings approached, his suitcase in hand, his soldier's instinct tingling with the sense that their work at Ravenscliff was not entirely done. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "the car will be here soon. Travers is in custody, the case is closed. Yet you're standing there as if you expect another body to turn up." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile softening his features. "Mon ami, you know me too well. The case of Monsieur Gray, it is solved, oui. The laudanum, the letters, the earring, they led us to Travers. But the heart of Ravenscliff, it beats with other secrets, secrets that do not concern murder but concern the soul. The little gray cells, they are restless." Hastings frowned, setting his suitcase down. "Other secrets? You mean Crane's business with Sir Reginald? Or Miss Price's evasiveness? You've been dropping hints about shadows, but what are you after?" Poirot's gaze drifted to the chandelier, its prisms catching the dim light. "The shadows, Hastings, they are not always criminal. They are the hidden truths of the heart, grudges, betrayals, fears. This house, it is a stage, and not all the players have left the scene." Their conversation was interrupted by the soft tread of footsteps. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne appeared, her sapphire necklace glinting faintly, her face composed but etched with strain. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice steady but soft, "I understand you're leaving us. I cannot thank you enough for sparing Beatrice further pain. This ordeal has broken her spirit." Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Madam, your daughter, she is young. The heart, it heals, though it bears scars. But tell me, the letters, have you read them? Do you know the full extent of her secret?" Lady Eleanor's hand tightened on her handkerchief, her composure faltering. I've seen some. They were to Dr. Travers, as you deduced. Foolish, girlish dreams. I should have watched her more closely." Poirot's voice was gentle but probing. "And your husband, madame? He spoke of Gray knowing things. Was there more to his knowledge? Something beyond Beatrice's letters?" Her eyes flickered, a shadow passing across them. "Reginald is a private man, Mr. Poirot. He carries burdens, business, family. Gray was loyal but curious. If he knew something, it died with him." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, madame. I wish you peace." As Lady Eleanor retreated, Hastings turned to Poirot, his curiosity piqued. "You're still digging, aren't you? You think Sir Reginald's hiding something?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The little gray cells, they wonder, Hastings. The business with Monsieur Crane, it is not as clean as it seems. Gray, he was nosy, as Sir Reginald said. Perhaps he overheard a detail, a debt, a deception that threatened more than Travers' secret." They moved to the drawing room where the remaining guests were gathered. their bags packed but their spirits heavy. Victor Crane stood by the window, his cigar unlit, his brashness tempered by the events. Margot Crane, her silk scarf draped elegantly, sipped tea with a detached air. Lionel Wentworth and his mother Clara sat in a corner, their conversation hushed. Miss Evelyn Price, her ledger tucked away, stood by a bookcase, her spectacles reflecting the light. Poirot approached Crane, his voice polite but firm. "Monsieur Crane, a word. Your partnership with Sir Reginald, it is a mining venture, yes? Yet the papers in the study, they were scattered, some missing. Did Gray perhaps know of irregularities?" Crane's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. "You're relentless, Poirot. My deal with Ashbourne is solid. Gray was a valet, not a bookkeeper. You're seeing ghosts." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ghosts, monsieur? Or truths? The little gray cells, they see what is hidden." Margot Crane interjected, her voice smooth. "Mr. Poirot, Victor's right. You've solved the murder. Let the rest lie. This house has seen enough turmoil." Poirot inclined his head, but his gaze shifted to Miss Price, who had been listening silently. "Mademoiselle Price," he said, "you are the keeper of Sir Reginald's accounts. Did you ever notice Gray near the study's papers, or perhaps a discrepancy in the books?" Miss Price's lips thinned, her hands clasping her skirt. "I've told you, Mr. Poirot, I was in my room that night. The accounts are my responsibility, and they are in order." Poirot nodded, but Hastings saw the spark in his eyes, a sign that he had caught a scent. As they stepped into the hall, Poirot lowered his voice. "The accounts, Hastings, they are the key to the shadow. Gray, he knew something, perhaps a fraud between Crane and Sir Reginald. It did not lead to his death, but it explains the tension in this house." Before Hastings could respond, the sound of a car crunching on the gravel drive signaled their departure. The guests gathered to bid them farewell, their faces a mix of gratitude and relief. Sir Reginald, his composure restored, offered a stiff nod. "You've done us a great service, Mr. Poirot. I hope you'll forget the troubles of Ravencliff." Poirot's smile was polite but enigmatic. "The troubles, monsieur, they are not forgotten, but they are no longer my concern. The truth, it has been served." Beatrice, standing beside her mother, looked up, her eyes red but resolute. "Thank you, Mr. Poirot. I'll never forget what you've done." Poirot bowed, his voice soft. "Mademoiselle, guard your heart. It is precious, but it must not lead you to ruin." As they climbed into the car, Hastings glanced back at the manor, its stone facade looming against the cliffs. "Poirot," he said, "you're leaving something behind, aren't you? Some secret you haven't shared." Poirot's eyes twinkled, his voice low. "The secret, Hastings, is not mine to share. The murder is solved, but the manor, it keeps its shadows. Let them rest, for now." The car pulled away, the cliffs fading into the mist as they drove toward the station. Ravencliff Manor receded, its echoes lingering in Hastings' mind, but Poirot sat in silence, his thoughts already turning to the next challenge, the next truth waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The train to London rattled through the Cornish countryside, its rhythmic clatter a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of Ravencliff Manor, now left behind in the mist. The cliffs and the sea, with their ceaseless whispers, were fading memories, yet the weight of the manor's secrets lingered in the air between Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings. Poirot sat by the window, his small frame neat and composed, his green-gray eyes fixed on the passing fields, though his mind was clearly elsewhere. Hastings, seated opposite, shifted restlessly, his thoughts still tangled in the unresolved echoes of the case. The murder of Thomas Gray was solved, Doctor. Malcolm Travers was in custody, but Poirot's cryptic hints about lingering shadows gnawed at him. Poirot, Hastings said, breaking the silence, "You've been uncommonly quiet since we left Ravencliff. The case is closed," Travers confessed, "and Beatrice is safe. Yet you're sitting there as if you've left a piece of the puzzle behind." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile softening his features. "Mon ami, you are perceptive, as always. The puzzle of the murder, it is complete. The laudanum, the letters, the earring, they led us to Travers. But the heart of Ravencliff, it beats with other truths. Truths that do not concern the law, but the soul. The little gray cells, they do not rest easily." Hastings leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "You keep talking about shadows, Crane's business, Sir Reginald's secrets, Miss Price's evasiveness. Are you saying there's another crime we missed?" Poirot's gaze shifted to meet Hastings, his eyes gleaming with quiet intensity. "Not a crime, Hastings, but a deception. The murder, it was the surface, but beneath there is a current of motives, greed, betrayal, fear. The business between Sir Reginald and Victor Crane, it is not clean. Gray, he knew something, perhaps a detail of fraud or a hidden debt. It did not lead to his death, but it explains the fear in the manner." Hastings frowned, his soldier's pragmatism struggling to keep pace. "But if it's not related to the murder, why does it matter? Travers killed Gray to protect Beatrice's secret. That's the end of it, isn't it?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The end of the murder, but not of the story. The human heart, it is a labyrinth, and Ravencliff, it is a house of mirrors. Each reflection shows a truth, but also a distortion. Let us consider, mon ami, the threads we have not yet pulled." He drew his notebook from his pocket, its pages a testament to his meticulous method, and flipped to a section marked with a precise asterisk. "The papers in the study," he said, his voice low. "They were scattered, but not randomly. Some were missing, financial documents perhaps, related to Crane's venture. Miss Price, she guards the accounts, yet she is evasive. And Sir Reginald, his silence about Gray's knowledge, it is too heavy." Hastings' eyes widened. "You think there's a financial scandal? Something Gray stumbled upon?" Poirot nodded slowly. "Gray, he was nosy, as Sir Reginald said. He overheard a conversation, perhaps between Crane and Sir Reginald, about their mining venture. A venture that promised wealth but hid losses, or worse, deceit. Gray's knowledge, it threatened someone but not Travers. Travers killed for love, but another they feared exposure." Hastings leaned back, his mind racing. "Miss Price, then? She's always with that ledger, and the note in the study matched her." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The pen, it is a clue, but not to murder. Miss Price, she is loyal to Sir Reginald, but her loyalty, it is strained. She knows something, perhaps a discrepancy in the accounts, a sum hidden or diverted. The note, it was not hers, but her pen was used, perhaps to cast suspicion elsewhere." The train whistle sounded, a sharp cry that jolted Hastings from his thoughts. "So what do we do, Poirot? We're leaving Ravencliff behind. You can't solve every secret in that house." Poirot's expression grew somber. "Non, mon ami, I cannot. The murder, it is solved, and that is my duty, but the little grey cells, they see the broader tapestry. I shall write to Sir Reginald a discreet letter urging him to examine his accounts. If there is deceit, it will surface without my hand. Hastings shook his head, a wry smile forming. You're incorrigible, Poirot. You can't resist tying up every loose end, even if it's not your case. Poirot's smile returned, a spark of his usual vigor. The loose ends, Hastings, they are what make the puzzle beautiful. Without them, the truth is incomplete. But for now, we return to London, to the order of my little flat, where the claret is superior and the air it is free of secrets. The train rattled on, carrying them through rolling hills and quiet villages, each mile distancing them from Ravencliff's shadows. Yet Hastings couldn't shake the image of the manor, its stone walls heavy with unspoken truths. "Do you think they'll be all right?" he asked. "Beatrice, Lady Eleanor, Sir Reginald?" Poirot's gaze softened, his voice gentle. "They will heal, Hastings, as all must. Beatrice, she will learn from her heart's folly. Lady Eleanor, she will guard her daughter more closely. And Sir Reginald, he will face his own shadows whether he wishes to or not. The truth, it has a way of finding the light." As the train neared London, Poirot closed his notebook, his movements precise and deliberate. "Come, mon ami," he said, rising. "The city awaits, and with it new puzzles. The little grey cells, they are never idle." Hastings chuckled, his unease fading. "You're impossible, Poirot, but I wouldn't have you any other way." The train pulled into the station, the bustle of London a stark contrast to the haunted quiet of Ravencliff. As they stepped onto the platform, Poirot paused, his eyes scanning the crowd with the same relentless curiosity that had solved the murder of Thomas Gray. The manor was behind them, its secrets left to simmer, but Poirot's mind, ever restless, was already seeking the next thread to unravel. Chapter 15. The Departure from Ravencliff. The London train steamed into the bustling heart of the city, its whistle a sharp farewell to the brooding cliffs of Cornwall and the shadowed halls of Ravencliff Manor. The afternoon sky was a patchwork of clouds, the city's clamor a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that had clung to the manor. Hercule Poirot sat by the carriage window, his small, neat figure a picture of composure, his green-gray eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction. "The murder of Thomas Gray was solved, Doctor. Malcolm Travers was in custody and the truth had been laid bare." Yet as Captain Hastings observed his friend, he sensed a lingering pensiveness, as if Poirot's mind still lingered on the manor's unresolved echoes. Hastings, seated opposite, adjusted his hat and leaned forward, his voice low to avoid the ears of fellow passengers. "Poirot, we're back in London, the case is closed and Travers is behind bars. Yet you've got that look, the one that says you're still unraveling something." "What is it?" "Ravencliff's behind us." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon ami, you are too observant. The case of Monsieur Gray, it is complete, oui. The laudanum, the letters, the earring, they led us to Travers. But the heart of Ravencliff, it does not yield all its secrets so easily. The little grey cells they reflect, they ponder the shadows that remain." Hastings frowned, his soldier's pragmatism wrestling with Poirot's cryptic musings. "Shadows again? You mean Crane's business with Sir Reginald? Or Miss Price's odd behavior? You said yourself those weren't tied to the murder. Why can't you let it go?" Poirot's gaze drifted to the passing cityscape, where chimney smoke curled against the gray sky. The murder, Hastings, it was the spark, but the fire, it burns deeper. The business between Sir Reginald and Victor Crane, it is not clean. Gray, he stumbled upon a truth, perhaps a fraud, a debt hidden in the accounts. Miss Price, she knows more than she says, her ledger a shield for secrets. These are not crimes, perhaps, but they are wounds in the soul of Ravenscliff. Hastings leaned back, his mind turning over the events at the manor. So you'll write to Sir Reginald, as you said? Warn him about the accounts? Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. Oui, a discreet letter, nothing more. The truth, it must surface in its own time. My duty was to the murder, and that duty is done. But the little gray cells, they do not like loose threads. The train slowed as it approached Paddington Station, its platform alive with porters and passengers. Poirot gathered his belongings, his movements precise and deliberate, as if each action were a final note in the symphony of the case. Hastings followed, his suitcase in hand, still grappling with the weight of Poirot's words. You know, Poirot, he said, sometimes I think you see too much. Not every secret needs solving. Poirot's eyes twinkled, a spark of his usual vigor returning. Perhaps, mon ami, but the truth, it is my calling. The heart, it hides its pain, but it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. Come, the city awaits, and with it the order of my little flat. The claret, it will be a comfort after the sea air. They stepped onto the platform, the bustle of London enveloping them like a familiar embrace. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose small frame seemed to grow larger in the city's chaos, his presence a beacon of clarity. What now, then? Hastings asked. Back to your flat, a quiet evening, and then what, another mystery? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Always, Hastings. The world, it is full of puzzles, and the little gray cells, they are never idle. But for tonight, a meal, a glass of claret, and the satisfaction of a case well solved. As they hailed a cab, Hastings' thoughts drifted back to Ravenscliff, the haunted faces of Beatrice, Lady Eleanor, Sir Reginald, and the others. The manor, with its stone walls and hidden truths, seemed a world away, yet its echoes lingered. Do you think they'll recover? He asked. Beatrice, especially. She was so broken. Poirot's expression softened, his voice gentle. The young, they are resilient, Hastings. Beatrice, she will learn from her heart's folly. Lady Eleanor, she will protect her daughter, and Sir Reginald, he will face his shadows, whether he wishes to or not. The truth, it leaves its mark, but it also sets free. The cab wound through London streets, past gaslit lamps and crowded pavements, carrying them toward Poirot's flat. Hastings leaned back, a smile tugging at his lips. You're a marvel, Poirot. I don't know how you do it. See through the lies, the secrets, the shadows. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice light but firm. It is simple, mon ami. The little gray cells, they observe, they reason, they understand the heart. And the heart, it always betrays the truth. As the cab pulled up to Poirot's building, the city's hum surrounded them, a reminder of life beyond the manor's gloom. Poirot stepped out, his cane tapping lightly on the pavement, his figure a symbol of order in a chaotic world. Come, Hastings, he said, his tone brisk. The night is young and there is much to discuss. Perhaps over a glass of that claret I have promised. Hastings chuckled, following his friend into the familiar warmth of the flat. Ravencliff Manor, with its secrets and shadows, was behind them, its story concluded but its echoes enduring. The murder of Thomas Gray was solved, the killer unmasked, but Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth would never rest, ready for the next mystery to unfold.